Dan Campbell, Ben Johnson, Jared Goff. I think if I had to rank it, Kory, I think I'd go Ben, Jared, then Dan. Where are you at with kind of how the game unfolded and who you'd, maybe not point the finger, but who deserves a little more blame than the rest?
I don't think that's a bad order. I think having Ben Johnson at the top is very apropos. I would probably put Goff at the bottom, but I mean, with him and Dan, it's either flexible. At the end of the day, it does fall on the head coach, so I can see why Dan Campbell went ahead and ultimately took blame yesterday and today for how things transpired. But I think really it boils down to the play calling of Ben Johnson. I mean, when you look at this team, they looked out of sync. They looked like they lacked chemistry, and I want to point out something that former NFL coach, former player Herm Edwards said today on ESPN when he was talking about how the Dallas Cowboys looked during their loss to the New Orleans Saints, and it was the lack of a preseason. When you do not have your starters play together in the preseason, and it's not a new offense, but you have Jameson Williams stepping up in a different role. You don't have Josh Reynolds there. That is a big piece with him leaving out there. You have to really get some type of continuity, some type of chemistry, because, again, they did not have that third wide receiver step up in camp, and I have some opinions about that as well. But I think what we just saw yesterday was just a lack of continuity and chemistry. So I think that does fall on the heads of Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson. Can kind of rotate those two, and then Jared Goff, because what they did not do is put the team in the best position to win. And Jared Goff dropping back 55 times is not the best position to win. I'm pretty sure this stat is maybe universal for a lot of quarterbacks, but when Jared Goff drops back at least 49 times, he's 2-8 in his career.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even know
that's not good at all. That is tough. Now, Kory, I do want to ask you, just kind of when it comes to the offense, just kind of a little deeper look into it. Obviously, they didn't get to the run game, it felt like, at all. Like, David Montgomery only 11 carries. Do you think that's something that they need to kind of really look in and say, hey, we do need – because I did hear Dan speak. I don't know if it's today or yesterday, but he mentioned that they were trying to open up the run game with the pass game yesterday, and that does not seem like a normal Detroit Lions team. It's usually let's run the ball and open up the pass game. Do you see them kind of going back to that and like, hey, we have to run the ball to be able to kind of win football games?
Yeah, but here's the thing. I think they should have stuck with the run because that was working yesterday. But when you kind of go back and look at some of the box scores of some of these games, the amount of times that they rushed the ball was kind of in line with that. They normally run Montgomery and Gibbs somewhere between 23 to 29 carries. It doesn't really get over that 30 carry limit that much. So the amount of times they ran the ball was pretty consistent. Again, though, you saw a lack of continuity and chemistry in that passing game because the guys, you got guys that have not necessarily played in these roles. Jameson Williams, yeah, he played last year, but this is now an elevated role for him. Josh Reynolds, again, I know some people saying, hey, that shouldn't be that big of a deal with him leaving, but you're talking about a guy that has been Jared Goff's one of his most reliable targets since they both got to Detroit. And that guy is left, and there is not a person that stepped up. So now you're kind of like figuring out this offense on the fly in real time because they did not have a preseason, which is why I said they should have probably played maybe a series or two. Because again, if the defending Super Bowl champions are playing their guys for a few series, everybody in the league should be playing their guys for a few series. In my opinion, is why you're seeing some of the rest from a lot of teams.
And Kory, I know we're trying to stay at least optimistic after this loss. And I think a good way to do that is focusing on this defense. What did you take away from Aaron Glenn? It felt like Baker Mayfield was carving the Detroit Lions up, but when you look back, he had under 190 passing yards. He had 34 yards on the ground, and then again, they completely shut down the Buccaneers' rushing offense. So when you take away, what do you take away from this Detroit Lions defense yesterday with Aaron Glenn?
I think for 2 straight games, I've seen the defense get out to some slow starts. I mean, they're letting teams move the ball up the field with ease and getting into the red zone. But what you got to do to give Aaron Glenn credit for is that when teams have gotten into the red zone, they've been pretty successful at keeping them out of it. Yesterday was the same thing. I mean, you saw what Baker Mayfield was doing outside of that scramble that he did to get that, those couple of scrambles he did at the end. I mean, their defense adjusted very well in the second half So you got to go ahead and give them some credit for that. I think Teran Arnold, rookie, got to go ahead and work out some of those kinks. But I mean, yesterday it was a madman. I mean, you almost saw. I was joking with our Dungeon of Doom insider text. Is something that we have at M Live where we talk to some fans that subscribe, and I just said, hey, the way Hutchinson is looking, he might go ahead and get 7 sacks. The way by the end of the game, it wasn't really looking too far fetched. So you got to go ahead and give them some credit for that. But I just like the way that they made those adjustments after halftime.
And another thing, Kory, too, just a little talking more about the game itself, and we'll get to because I do want to pick your brain on the Cardinals game and kind of what you expect. But when you look at at least the secondary, Teran Arnold, they called another PI call on Teran. Do you think that is partially just the adjustment to the NFL, I guess, and physicality, because he's playing at Alabama, now you're getting to the NFL, which NFL, they roll. They favor the offense. So I feel like that's more of an adjustment period. What do you make of the pass interference plays and just Teran Arnold through 2 games now? He's wearing the club too, Kory. He had the club on as well.
Yeah, I think he's going to be fine. I mean, obviously, those are some things that you have. Okay, let me do it like this. Because like this kind of fits into the overall thing. I have like 3 stages of Lions that I'm going with this. You got the question phase, you have the concern phase, and then you got the panic button. I think right now we're in the question phase where you're questioning some of the things that's going on right now. Because again, this is they're 1-1. They started out 1-1 last year, and they lost yesterday's game to a division winner. So I would say right now, just kind of like keep an eye on it, have questions, hope that by I say week 4. You kind of see some improvement. Then you go into the bye week. So hopefully by that time they come out the bye week and they play Dallas, you start to see some improvement from them. But right now you're just starting to see some rookie growing pains and him trying to figure out the league, in my opinion.
Yeah, Kory, another thing, last thing here, at least for me, because I do want to, I'm with Jeff. I want to hear what you have to think about kind of the future of this team going into Sunday. But last thing with Jared Goff, I would like to kind of hear your thoughts process, because I don't know. I'm sure you're active on social media. I'm sure you've seen on Twitter a lot of people talking about. I've seen Hendon Hooker.
Maybe a certain outlet.
I've seen people talk about Hendon Hooker, and I think it's a little ridiculous and kind of crazy. Like the way I talked about it at the beginning of the show, it's just like, let's not turn our back on some people, like a guy like Jared Goff who did what he did to end the season. Like he's still a good quarterback. What are your thoughts on how he played and kind of his future kind of going forward? Like, is he going to be able to obviously get out of this, but kind of, is it just more so, hey, let's take the weight off Jared Goff, get to the run game? But what are your thoughts on this whole Jared Goff situation?
Back to my stages of Lions. Question, concern, panic. We're in the question phase right now. You got some questions about what's going on, and it kind of ties back to what I said before about their chemistry and the continuity of the offense, trying to figure some things out. But I mean, again, let's look at what happened yesterday. Again, we already talked about them having the lack of preseason that could probably affect some of the chemistry issues. But again, they went against a division winner. Now, I put some stats right here. The Buccaneers, their defense gave up a lot of yards last year. They gave up a lot of yards yesterday. The Lions actually doubled them in total offense. So, I mean, the Buccaneers defense has given up a lot of yards. But there's one, and they were also middle of the pack last year when it comes to takeaways. But the one thing that you got to remember, the Bucs were 6th in the league last year. Their defense, they were 6th in points allowed. They only allowed 19 points per game. That's pretty damn good.
Yeah.
So you're talking about Todd Bowles, a guy that is well regarded around the league as a defensive-minded coach, a defensive guru. That's who they lost to. The Lions in their past 3 matchups, the Buccaneers and the Lions have had some tough games. And even though sometimes there may not necessarily be some carryover from the last season to the next, it's still kind of hard to lose to the same team 3 times in a row when both teams are very good teams. So I think right now is just that you're hoping to see that Ben Johnson, Dan Campbell put Jared Goff in better positions to win. I think when you saw the way that the game was going yesterday and Jared Goff didn't have it going, and then the running game had it going, you got to stick with that. I mean, they had 139 yards on the ground. Gibbs and Montgomery accounted for 119 of that. They were averaging 5 yards, nearly 5 yards per carry. I mean, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So I think right now, again, they did not put Jared Goff in the best position, and they didn't do a good job of establishing the play action, which is his bread and butter. When Goff has that play action going, he's pretty much unstoppable. So I don't think they put him in the best position to win, and I think they're going to correct that heading into Sunday.
And kind of just going off with the Jared Goff thing here, Kory, and I want to get your opinion on this as well. When you look at this offensive line, I still think it's the best offensive line in the NFL, but I do not believe that they are playing like it as of right now. What do you think? Do you think the loss of Jonah Jackson, now adding in Kevin Zeitler, Graham Glasgow starting there full time, what do you think is going on with this offensive line? Because I think even against the Rams, I said it, and I still think it's a fact, through the first 4 quarters of that game, the Los Angeles Rams defensive line was definitely having their way at points. Now in overtime, you saw them flip the switch. But you look at no Kalijah Kancey, Vita Vea left the game yesterday, and Jared Goff, he was obviously uncomfortable. He was under a lot of pressure. I get that Todd Bowles is a great defensive coach, great defensive mind, and he simply outcoached Ben Johnson and Dan Campbell yesterday. But I don't understand how this offensive line is looking the way that it does. What is your opinion on that?
Again, might be some rust, might be some continuity from lack of a preseason. Again, you can't simulate real action. You can't simulate, real-time playing. I mean, I know they do the joint practices, and that, some of the time when they do the joint practices, they have the scrimmage with the other teams, and that's supposed to, mimic an actual game. But it's still, even though they do that, that is still joint practice. It's not. And I'm not trying to go Allen Iverson. It's not a game, but it's joint practice, and you can't simulate. No matter how much you got the speakers blaring in practice or whatnot, you can't simulate playing in front of 40,000 plus people. So I think right now they're just a little bit rusty from actually playing together. Again, I believe they're gonna correct some things. One thing we have not really seen from this unit since they started going ahead and moving up is back-to-back losses. So I believe they're gonna go ahead and correct some mistakes. You got some guys in there that, like I said, they haven't played together. Zeitler, new to the team. Jonah Jackson, I don't like to wish bad on anybody, but when you just see the news that just came out about him today, it might have been a blessing in disguise that they don't have him right now, because boom, now you're wondering how you're going to replace him because he's not on the IR. So they got some stuff they got to work out pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'll ask you about the Cardinals game. I mean, I'm going to be honest. This Cardinals team, I thought they'd win between 7 and 8 games. They look good. I mean, they absolutely destroyed the Rams last week, and now they're feeling confident. Rookie Marvin Harrison Jr.'s. I mean, that connection, I have him on my fantasy team. I'm a happy man. But the connection him and Kyler are starting to come along. Where are you at with just the matchup and the threat the Cardinals pose? Because Kory, Baker, he's making a miss. I mean, Malcolm Rodriguez hit dirt.
Yeah,
and now you got Kyler Murray. He's small, but he's quick. What kind of threat you think the Cardinals pose this week to the Lions? By the way, they're on the road, which I do think might be a good thing. Get them out of Ford Field. Get them on the road.
I cannot remember correctly, so I believe I talked this. I can't remember who I told this to, but I had the Cardinals down as a trap game. I had them starting the season 2-0. I had them starting the season 2-0 and then running into the Cardinals as a trap game. Not necessarily saying that the Cardinals was going to be the better team, but just one of those games where sometimes teams inexplicably lose a game, and I have that as their trap game. You got a guy like Kyler Murray who is able to get outside the pocket and still throw it on the dart. The Lions have just struggled over the past couple of years with mobile quarterbacks, and now you got a Kyler Murray with a young guy who's just I can't even find the superlative to describe Marvin Harrison Jr. So I mean,
he's different.
And he's mad different. So now you got him going up against this Lions secondary that has started out slow in 2 games. It could get very interesting. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, Kory, I heard you mention earlier the wide receiver 3 situation, how you were like, I had something about that. We were kind of talking about that earlier in the season. Tim Patrick, he was out there, and I think he played it. I can't remember the exact snap count. I think it was at least over 30 snaps or around there. And he got a lot of snaps in. Do you think that's going to be a thing where they're going forward, especially in Arizona, trying to get an X wide receiver out there to spread the field out? Do you think they roll forward with Tim Patrick?
I don't have to even think about that. Dan Campbell just said it verbatim. So that removes all.
Let's go. I love that.
Yeah, Dan Campbell said today during practice that not during practice, during the media session, that they liked what they saw of Tim Patrick yesterday and how he came in quickly, asserted himself in the offense, and they feel that he has a place here, and they plan to open it up a little bit more and get him more involved. So I believe Tim Patrick is a guy that has made a name for himself and could be that third wide out that they've been looking for. I mean, we know they signed DPJ back. They brought in Allen Robinson, and they brought in Tim Patrick, and Tim Patrick was a guy that, just from observing my social media, a guy that a lot of fans wanted to bring here despite his injury concerns. So I mean, I liked what I saw. I like what I saw out of him. I mean, I know I have no bias, but just seeing what he did, I thought that in the little bit of time he did, he was impressive and probably could step up more and be in this offense. I'm curious to see how they're gonna, if Jared Goff is going to give him a little bit more targets starting next week, to kind of go ahead and establish that third wideout.
And Kory, real quick, can you go through your 3 levels again? It was questioning.
Oh yeah. So you got the question phase, where you're just like, okay, what are you doing? What's going on? You got your concern phase, like, okay, this is not this. I'm not worried, but this is not looking like what I think it should look like. Then you got the panic, like, what the is going on? Those are my 3 phases.
Okay, so let's say
concern, panic.
Let's say the Lions go into Arizona. They do not walk out of there with a W, but they hang in there. They don't get steamrolled or anything. Where would your progress along those 3 stages lie after that?
This is a big answer, Kory. Hey.
Still question. I'll give you this much.
There we go, Kory. I love that.
Here's where you get to the concern phase. You get to the concern phase if the Lions go into the bye week 1 and 3.
Okay,
That's when you get to the concern phase, because you're like, okay, wait a minute, what's going on here? If they go into in a perfect world, they go into this bye week 3 and 1 based off of the loss. But when you get to that concern phase, if they go into their 1 and 3, because now you're looking like, okay, you're putting yourself in a little bit of a hole that you shouldn't be in, with the division that has Jordan Love out for a couple of weeks. The Minnesota Vikings are out to a 2-0 start, which is something I didn't expect. And then you got the Bears, who are falling down. So it's like, okay, all right, wait a minute. This is not going the way that it should be going. So if they lose on Sunday, it's still at the question phase. But if they go into that bye week 1 and 3, then you drop down to the concern.
Okay, that's fair. Hey, Kory, before we get you out of here, we got 2 questions from the people. Is it cool if I throw them up? 2 questions?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
All right. I got the first one. Ed asks, he says, ask Kory what he needs to see versus Arizona. What do you need to see this week?
I think the Lions need to go establish more of a balanced attack and really just pay attention to what Goff is doing. I understand yesterday was a situation where they were just trying to go ahead and get a win. But when you're only down really a score, you don't have to really just go so heavy with the pass, and especially if you see the run is working. So I would say just not necessarily get so cute. Don't try to be the smartest person in the room. If you see something is working, keep on attacking it. I think they gave the Buccaneers run defense a little bit too much respect, especially off of the success rate. So I think they need to go ahead and set the tone early and not get out to a slow start, because these slow starts have been what's hurting them. I mean, they really, because of these slow starts, they could very well have easily started this season 0-2.
Yep, agreed. Last question. Big Dan Davis says, Kory, Coach Campbell says Tim Patrick has earned an upgraded role in this offense. Does this mean Patrick becomes the Josh Reynolds of this offense? What do you think? And what do you think of that Josh Reynolds stuff, by the way? Like, they miss Josh. Have you heard that a lot? Probably.
I'm going to say this. First off, we are going into week 3. Week 3.
Yep.
Josh Reynolds is coming off he's playing right now. He's coming off of a career year. He's been one of the most reliable targets in the Lions offense since he's been here. I don't think Tim Patrick, as solid as I think Tim Patrick played in his limited action yesterday, I think that crowning him the new Josh Reynolds would take a season worth of work before you get to that level, or at least 8 weeks, 9 weeks of like, okay, this guy is producing, because Josh Reynolds just picked the wrong time to have those drops, to have a worse game. The guy was coming off of a career year. He's been a guy that when the Lions needed somebody to step up over these past, 2 seasons, he's been the guy that has done that. Those are some big shoes to fill. And I think that does, affect the chemistry in the pass game a lot, because you don't have that guy. Now you're trying to figure out on the fly what this passing attack is going to look like.
Yeah. Agreed there. Hey, Kory, we appreciate you guys. Go give Kory a follow at Kory Woods and check his stuff out. mlive.com does a great job. I mean, Kory hit me up. He says, I got some things to get off my chest. I said, this is a platform. Hey, exactly you text me, Kory. Open invite.
I just wanted everybody, people hitting me up. I'm like, it's week. It's only been 2 weeks. Calm down. They started out 1-1 last year.
Right.
Relax.